All right, well that's loading up. Do you kind of want to explain what the game is?
It's like this kind of like we pitched it as like a WarioWare style game, right? So what
Yeah.
it is like we made eight like micro games over like eight scenes.
Mhm.
And so there is a when you go from I think start scene is the scene that you want to be on.
Yeah.
That'll start the gameplay loop where you have like each challenge is very like short time. They're all like either they use WASD platformer mechanics or
Mhm.
they use clicking mechanics or they use dragging mechanics.
Yeah.
And so the goal is to just get all is to learn what the challenges are, get them done. You get six wrong, then you fail the game. You have to try again, right? So it's kind of a
Okay.
high score. Do as many. It's repetition, really. Is what it is. But
Nice. I
yeah,
like it.
get as many games as you can
It's
complete
funny.
before you eventually burn out.
Eventually very nice. I like that. All right. This is just opening here. Kind of wait for that.
It was
Um,
made with a team of four. I was front end coder. We had
nice.
two Unity veterans. We back end. We had one artist.
Nice. Okay. So yeah, that's a pretty big team. We'll kind of uh see that. Yeah. Um, let's see, there's a scripts folder here. I see. Y'all were pretty organized.
Yeah, a lot of file management.
Yeah. This is a lot for 2 days. That's really cool. All right. Classic Unity taking a while. Okay. While we're waiting for that, so what are the sorts of things that you'll like typically think about when you're like polishing a game? What is like is this like a thing that you'll like consciously like block out time for? Or like saying I'm going to spend the last like however much time of in whatever the length of the development cycle is to polish? Is this like a special consideration?
When we were working on the
Yeah.
game, we so according so again two of teammates were Unity veterans and have game gens before,
Yeah.
and they typically would like to allocate like the back half of the last day to polishing.
Yeah.
And so, but because we had so many people and the back end was still buggy,
Yeah.
they had me polish, and that was mostly just like VFX, post processing kind of stuff, VFX and
Mhm.
particles, sound effects. And then we just like the last bit of polishing was making sure the game flow was clean, so conditions were simple, no like big like lag buffers or anything.
Of course. Yeah. So, like, I think that's like a good approach. What I basically want to argue here is that you should block out time. Like, this shouldn't just be like a thing that happens if you like maybe have time. But like, whenever you do any project, you should always kind of aim to have a section of time where you just make it sort of feel better. And so you mentioned a few really good things, right? You have so we just got your game open here. You mentioned a few things. You mentioned particle effects, visual effects,
Sound.
post-processing sound, also making sure there were no big lag spikes, right? So um, when you're thinking about these sorts of things, right, like what is the purpose of like how do you decide I want a particle effect here or I want a sound effect here?
And for me, it was just kind of like I have the asset and spray, and I'm like,
Yeah,
I want it to be like this. And for example, like one of the micro games is to click on a spark before it sets off a bomb.
yeah,
Oh, it's a spark. I want it to be sparking. Let's get a particle link in there. Because of the gravity settings, what does like a sparking wire look like to
yeah,
me, right? And so
yeah, exactly.
it's just kind of I look at the object, what should be there, and I put it there.
Yeah, so like what should be there is like that's one reason we polish is like you want to feel more interactive, right? If there's no polish, if there's no particle effects, if there's not those subtle things, the world kind of just feels empty. Right? So even something as simple as like a blade of grass, if you have like blades of grass, make them sway a little bit, adding little animations like that. Um, adding one of the big things I always like to see is layers in games. So if you have like a platformer, for example, it's really nice if the background doesn't exactly move with the foreground. You want to move a little bit slower. And it's really nice, extra bonus points if you have some kind of foreground. So like let's say you're like making like a platformer that takes place in like a city level or something, or like a mountain or something. You could put like a lamppost or like a few big rocks in the foreground that move a little bit ahead of the player, right? So I don't think we have fully time to like implement a parallax system, but Let's say we want to do this, yes. This is true, yeah. Yeah, so you can also do that. You can do one easily by changing to a perspective camera. Um, one reason you might not want to do that is that, for example, you don't necessarily get as much control. Like you would have to basically send something all the way to the like -1000 on the z-axis, right, to get it to move like that. And also that affects the size of your sprites, right? So when you're actually doing the art, you would have to properly size your sprites to account for the z. So you have to know what level of parallax you want before you actually put it in, right? So you definitely can do that. And I would say like if you just want a really quick parallax system, just set the camera to be perspective is a really good idea. Does everyone know the difference between orthographic and a perspective camera? Does anyone not know? Yeah. So if you are in a 3D game, right? A perspective camera basically looks like it works in the same way that like your vision works, right? It looks something like this. Right? So when something is really close to you, it looks really big, right? But that same thing really far away is going to look a lot smaller, right? So that clock looks really small, but it's only because it's far away. I know if I were closer, it would look bigger, right? So this is how your vision works. This is how like a 3D camera works. So one of the side effects of that is if I move some amount of distance here, right? This is the total sort of my field of vision at this point. Back here, that's going to translate to a lot less movement, right? Because it's sort of stretched out. This is the same reason why, for example, if you look at the moon, if you've ever been driving and you look at the moon barely moves, right? Like the moon just looks like it stays there. That is because the moon is like really, really far away, right? So to you, it's barely moving. Where something closer is going to move a lot faster. So this is what we call parallax. Right? This just happens naturally whenever you have a perspective camera. Does anyone want to explain what orthographic camera is? This is basically your standard 2D camera. So everything here, it basically looks like this, right? If my like bad 3D drawing, but and your character is like somewhere here in the foreground, right? So somewhere like here, right? So if an object is right here, right, it's going to look the same size as if it were back here, right? So the distance basically doesn't matter; it all gets flattened, right? So this is what we use for 2D games, right? And that's convenient because if you don't have to change the size of your sprites to get that parallax out of it. Actually, we can probably see it here if we go here. So this is I'll use the UI, yeah.
See one of the games at the different scene.
Mhm.
We did this interestingly. I was talking with the team. They were like,
Yeah.
yeah, we made a 2D game in the 3D camera.
Yeah, you can do this, yeah. So actually that's one thing. We can look here. Maybe let's look at a
Go to games folder,
games folder.
and just pick one at any of them. Yeah.
Okay, let's look at this one.
Yeah.
Yeah, so here's a good example. So this is a 3D camera, right? I have 2D locked here because this is you do that, but I can look in the world and see that this is actually a 3D camera. You can see the main camera sort of looks like this, right? So it goes out in like a cone, like this. However, if I were to switch this to orthographic, then you can see it flattens, right? So this is the main difference, right? Let me just go back to 2D here. So it's cool that y'all decide to do that because you can do that. Was there a particular reason that y'all made that decision?
I think it, according to the team, according to the veterans, they were like, there's just more tools in the 3D rendering engine.
This is true.
Yeah, we would have like, if we would have done more backgrounds and layers, we had time, right?
Yeah.
But everything kind of flat planes for now, but yeah.
Yeah. So exactly, there are some features that are available in 3D that are not available in 2D. Although I think they're getting better about that. Like as time goes on, they have more of those features in 2D as well. For example, now I think it's standard that all 2D games just have the universal render pipeline is built in. So a lot of those sort of graphical features that you said, like you can have lighting just out of the box. Yeah. So we like orthographic cameras because we don't have to care about the size and the z distance. But we do like parallax because it gives us depth, right? So how do we sort of take parallax with an orthographic camera? Does anyone have any ideas? What?
Move the objects in the background slowly.
Yeah, exactly. So one easy way you might do this is you would basically make a script, right? Some sort of parallax layer. And then you would have on your camera, you would make some sort of parallax camera. These are just scripts that you would write. Parallax camera. Right, so you basically make two scripts. These parallax layers would get basically attached to any sort of background layer that you want to have it to be parallax. So if you have different layers in your background, you can attach this to all of them, right? And let's start with the parallax camera. The way I would do this is, and there are definitely fancier ways to do this, but if you just want something simple working, is you have the start position of the camera. So when the game starts, you just record the start position of the camera. And then you have the current position. If you subtract these, you get the offset from the center, from wherever you started from, right? So if you have that offset, you're like, my camera has moved this amount from the center in this amount of time, right? So if you do that, you can then say, I want my parallax layer to be offset by the camera offset multiplied by some parallax factor. Right. So you basically say, if my camera has moved an offset of 2 units, then this should have moved an offset of, let's say, 0.5 units, right? So if my parallax factor is 0.5, then this would have moved a total of 1 units to the right, right? So you can make things faster than the camera, you can make things slower than the camera. That's just a very simple way to do it. You can also make this, for example, you may not want it to work on the y-axis, you may only want to take into account the z-axis, so you can just cancel out the y-offset of whenever you have loops, right? That's a very simple way to do it. This doesn't allow you to loop, but for example, if you had like an endless runner and you wanted to sort of loop things around, then what you would have to do is you would have to duplicate it on either side, and whenever something reaches the end of the screen, it gets moved over to the back, right? But for a simple parallax, this is something that will work. And that kind of helps add depth, right? The other thing we were talking about is so that's one reason you might polish, just to make the game world feel like it has a little bit more depth to it, right? But there are also like very practical reasons to polish, right? If I took everything in my game and I added sound effects to literally everything, right? Would that be a good idea?
If you get overstimulated,
Yeah, right. So part of the function that polish serves is not just to like make the world feel more immersive. It's also a very practical reason that it makes the game more readable to the player, right? For example, when you get how many of y'all have been playtesting a game and you like give your game to someone and they're just like completely confused? Like this is pretty common, I would say. Like if you've ever, yeah. One of the more common questions I get is how do you know that I was they're like confused and like did I take damage or not? Right? Whenever they get hit by something, they're like confused as to like how they know that. But you're like, I put a particle effect, right? How do you not know that you took damage? You often need like multiple signals, right? So you need things like maybe some UI indication. Maybe if you have like a heart system, right? You can like animate one of these, right? Or anything like that, right? You want a particle effect, right? You want some kind of maybe screen shake. And of course you want a sound effect. An animation helps too, even if it's just like changing the opacity of the player, right? Because when you get hit, sometimes you want to make the player invincible for a second, right? Just so that like if they get hit by two things at once, it's not like double jeopardy, right? And they just die instantly and have no idea what happened. So you have all of these things that can be used to basically communicate to the player that they took damage, right? Um, and if you only have one of these things, the chance of them noticing, because they're already overstimulated, just trying to figure out your game, right? They're already overstimulated. You need to make it you need to make it super, super clear whenever like the player gets hurt, right? So if they're already like they're just trying to figure out the controls, they don't necessarily have the mental bandwidth to only pay attention to one. So you have to make it really, really obvious. So you want to go overboard on the effects when it's something you really need to communicate, right? If it's something important that happened, like the player getting hurt, the player needs to know when they get hurt. If the player thinks the game is unfair because they don't know when they get hurt, they're not going to think the game is fun. So I would say like taking damage is the most important thing that you should polish, right? The inverse of that is things that are maybe not so important, you should be more subtle than you maybe think you should be. So whenever you're like, for example, we mentioned like animating blades of grass, right? That's something you can do, but however much you think you need, like however much animation you think you need, cut it by about a half, right? It's those subtle details that you want, and then you want to go overboard on the things that matter, right? So it's not just a random process of like just throwing particle effects wherever you want to throw particle effects. You want to be intentional about them because they also serve the purpose of communicating something to the player, right? It's all just extra stimulus that tells you, hey, something here is happening. So there's lots of ways to do that. So that's kind of why you polish, right? And um, these are things that you may not necessarily have time for when you're doing a game jam. But this is why I always encourage people to not just let your game jam games sit in the box, like somewhere in a corner. Actually, like go in and change them and make them better, even if you're not going to show it to anyone. Because these help develop your attention to detail in a way that, you being in a 48-hour situation, you might not necessarily care about. We can actually go to this game then, and maybe we can look for ways to kind of
This game is pretty simple, actually.
Yeah.
Do the node repair scene. Open that one.
Which one?
No, it says
Node
node
repair?
repair. Yeah, that one's a platformer style. I think it'd be
Okay, nice.
more fun to break down.
Nice, yeah. Okay, so let's look at this one then. Okay, nice. So you can see that there's a particle effect when I click on that, right? So it helps me know that something happened, right? And of course the animation changes. You have a nice little there. We can go here. Nice. Okay. So then where do I go from here?
So again, so if you were in, so the start scene starts the game loop. So what it would be is that once you finish this game,
Yeah.
it'll send it's like an event bus to the game manager.
Mhm.
All right, cool. Loading the next random game.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
Nice, nice. So okay, it'll just keep switching
Yes.
between these things. Oh, are these scenes like is there don't destroy and load here that
Yes, exactly.
Nice,
So
nice.
go to the larger scenes for the greater room.
Yeah?
Yeah. And then you open start menu.
Okay.
If you want to actually play, see it in action. If you want to see it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a cool idea. I think I want to kind of see it. And I think that platforming scene is going to be a good good one for us to break down. Okay. Enter time machine, space bar or mouse.
That's a slip clicking one.
I have to click on.
Yeah, line up the spinner with the dials.
Oh, I see, I see.
Timer's in the top left corner. Oh no, you failed.
Oh, I failed. And then what do I do with this?
Click, just click.
Okay.
There you
Nice.
go. Yeah, so there are.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so the word the numbers in word form are buttons you click. Yeah, down there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I know it's janky. Yeah.
And then this is.
Yeah, this one you want to get it to the yellow bar section up top.
Oh, like that.
Like that.
Okay.
You want to hold it there 5 seconds. I think you're overshooting it by a little bit.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, I can do this.
It's buggy. You only got a couple shades.
I also think the screen recording is making it run a little bit slower for me, but that's all good. Oh, I gotta run. Oh, shit.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Failure and repetition is the name of this game.
Nice. You can get this one like that. Okay.
Click the spark,
Oh,
click.
the spark. Oh, okay, nice. And then this goes here. Nice. This one I don't understand. Use
Okay,
buttons below.
so yeah, match the sequence, 1, 3, 2, then you click the word one, and then two,
Oh,
and then
okay.
two, yeah,
Okay, okay. And then this I have to go.
yeah. You see the timer going up. A little bit of a font issue, yeah,
Oh, it's pretty hard. Yeah,
yeah. It's a masking thing, yeah, it's not
yeah.
clean.
Ah,
Well, we call this one the run killer. The game's
yeah.
the end screen. Then you can go back again and restarts the loop. So yeah,
Nice,
when
nice.
you click enter time machine, that'll load up the game manager, which will destroy and load, but then all the other scenes will open and close when necessary.
Nice, nice. Yeah, no, thanks for showing this. This is impressive for 2 days. This is like really like there's a lot of work that goes into something like this. Incredible y'all got that in. But yeah, okay. So let's start with one. Uh we'll go node repair. Okay. First of all, I'll ask you, do you have any like initial ideas? Like if you had to work on this now, what's like the next thing you would do?
Well, I mean, it's a micro game, so it's inherently like simplistic.
Yeah.
I just think like large, some like ambient stuff, just like like even
Hmm.
like a run sound effect when he runs, or like
Okay.
like or
So
like
like
music,
footsteps?
or like a success music cue. So the player,
Nice.
the big thing that I noticed when I was playing again was like there's no indicator, there's no failure or success indicator.
Yeah.
That's the thing with the overall game, right? So I think it's like a success sound effect or a failure sound effect, which help each the player whether or not they know when they failed, right?
Yeah, exactly. 'Cause I don't think I knew when I like failed or passed one. It just
Yeah.
kind of moved me over. So yeah. So like music cues are like a really good way to do that. Music cues for success slash failure, right? Um Basically players want to know when they're doing good or when they're doing bad, right? This comes down to, right, like you can have a game that's really, really hard, and it's okay as long as the player perceives it being fair, right? Um, and one of the ways that the player can perceive it being fair is if they know what's happening, right? And the way you do that is just by letting them know. And oftentimes you have to do that in lots of ways. So like you can do success slash failure. You could like make the you could make like confetti come down when they pass, or like a big red X show on the screen.
We
Yeah.
had a version where if you felt succeeded, it'll open up another scene saying, "Wow, you did it."
Yeah.
But then we had issues with some game manager backend stuff that we didn't fix until like a few hours before the deadline.
Yeah.
And so we just kind of scrapped that middle scene because
Mhm.
it was causing the issue, and so we
I
just
see.
had to fix it.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. So there's stuff like that that you can consider adding back in. There's also how do I know when I'm about to switch to a new like when the time runs out? Is there a timer in the corner?
Yeah, there's a timer
Okay, yeah.
at the top left corner of like the main UI. Yeah, because what it is
Yeah.
like it's a UI screen, and then it loads all the micro games like in a scene behind it. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it layers the scenes.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. That's cool. There's stuff like that that like I sort of vaguely picked up on the fact that there was a timer, but I was so focused on trying to understand the game.
Right.
And it's like my focus is not necessarily on the timer. One thing you can do there is literally just a giant sound effect that counts down like 32 1.
Uh-huh.
So it makes like really clear when you're about to switch. So like making the timer, a timer very clear. So stuff like that.
Yeah, because like our main inspiration was like WarioWare, and like it's
Yeah.
like WarioWare does that all the time, right?
Yeah.
Big like 5, 4, 3.
Exactly,
two,
yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, so stuff like that, like there's no way I can possibly miss that,
Mhm.
right? And as the player gets used to it, gets used to the game, like you can kind of be a little bit more subtle with them, but especially at the beginning. And this is kind of unrealistic to do in a game jam game when you're doing like the onboarding process, right? You want to be really like big about these sorts of things, right? An experienced player would definitely be able to see that timer in the corner.
Yeah, like we made the game, you know how it works. We
Yeah,
really
exactly.
like run it well, but yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And these are just the limitations of a game jam game, which is why I think it's important to keep working on them. That way you get practice with this sort of thing. Yeah, so I like both of these ideas. Anybody else have any comments, things that nice details that would be good to add? Yes.
At least for the lava minigame, make the green part be a little bit like transparent or like layered behind the lava so you could actually see the.
Yeah, that's good because I think it was a little bit over it, right? At some points, yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, making So all of this stuff has to do with like clarity, right? You want to be you want to communicate as much to the player how they're doing. It sort of feels weird when you're kind of like, am I winning? Am I not winning? I don't know, right? If I yeah, so I think that's a really like easy suggestion is just to lower the transparency. Then that makes it really clear when I'm doing well or when I'm not doing well. So those are all really good suggestions.
I don't want to keep self-polishing, but
They're all good.
one thing we wanted to do, we actually been trying to do it where the longer like your streak was, the faster the games were. And so it started off with because like someone like for example, the Lava Rising, that's tied to the game time.
Yeah.
But we used to think that's how they were it, right? But like but that would have been the idea. But instead they all have like a flat timer, which is like fine. But we want to make like when we start the game, zero streak. Games are slow, gives you more time to learn them.
Yeah.
And once you the longer your streak, and once you've learned the games, then it'll be like way faster times.
That's nice, yeah. So that's like another part of polish, right? Is how do you make the game more like interesting, right? So what you said is like the game should have a difficulty curve,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
So like it should get harder as you go, and that makes it that makes it like more interesting to play, right? What are other ways that like like what makes a game like interesting? Like, this is kind of an abstract question, but like it's kind of important. Yeah. Progress, yeah. So you want some progress. Yeah. Another thing is possibly like variety. Right. So variety and progress make games more interesting. Increasing difficulty. So this kind of goes like the difficulty curve is a form of progress, right? What else like makes a game interesting to play? The other ideas.
Replayability.
Yeah, so replayability. So that kind of comes into variety, right? So you want to be able to replay the game a lot. Yeah. Ah, my handwriting. I don't know why I bother writing things down. There was a pretty famous game designer that he worked on. I think it was like The Sims or something. He has like a quote that like I don't think it's true, but I think it's useful. And he says basically like you can define a game as like a series of interesting decisions. Um, that's probably not true. Like there are probably games that are not a series of interesting decisions, but I think it's a useful framework for how to think about when you're playing and sort of iterating on your game. So like what makes a decision interesting? So first of all, what decisions do we have to make when we play a game, right? From the player's perspective, and what makes those decisions interesting or not interesting? Any thoughts? Yeah, exactly. So I have to decide like where to move, for example, is how to move, when to move forward, back, left, right. In the case of platformer, when to jump, right? So like those are all just kind of things that we do. What makes those decisions interesting or not interesting?
Consequences?
Consequences, yeah. Um,
Like good or bad, right? It's like, for example, like, oh, I want to do this jump. If I don't make this jump, then I don't progress. If I do make the jump and I fail, then I have to try again, right? If I make it, then wow, I progressed.
yeah, exactly. So one way to make a decision interesting is it's if it's like I guess like a high stakes decision, right? There has to be some kind of tension, right?
Risk and reward.
Yeah, there has to be risk, there has to be reward. That makes us that adds to sort of the conflict of the game that you want to keep going, right? So if you can if there's no risk, then your player's not going to be emotionally invested in your game. They're probably not going to care that much. Another way to make decisions that are interesting is when the right thing to do is not necessarily obvious. Uh, what I mean by that is like, who's played a game where the like correct thing to do is basically button mash, and you just kind of turn your brain off? Yeah. Well, yeah. So the correct thing to do is literally just to sit there and click as fast as humanly possible, right? That's maybe not so interesting because it's always obvious what you're supposed to do, right? It's just like I'm just going to sit there and I'm going to click as fast as possible, and I'm just going to like button mash and things are going to work out, right? We want there to be sort of trade-offs that the player has to consider. right? So, um, for example, it shouldn't always be the best strategy to button mash, right? You should have to make your player think about, oh, if I go here, then like we talked about consequences, like they have to weigh different consequences. Their decisions have to like actually have an impact, right? So it's not only like it's similar to the idea of like uh who here has watched a movie where the main character basically makes no decisions of their own and the plot just basically happens to them? Like those are usually boring movies to watch. Yeah.
There's only one example, but the whole point is that it is that. It's
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so you can do that intentionally, right? But it's bad when it's done unintentionally, and it just kind of seems like, oh, well, this character doesn't do anything. I don't care about them. Um, it's kind of like you want the player's decisions to have a clear effect on what happens to them. Another way of doing this is I don't know if anyone here has played like MOBAs or like class-based shooters also like typically have like healing characters, right? And the strategy is you want to kill the healer first, right? Because the healer is what's sort of keeping their entire team alive, right? So if you're playing like Overwatch, for example, right? Your team, whenever you're going in, you want to target the healer, right? So that makes it the decision more interesting because you have to plan around that, right? You can't just say shoot at whatever's in front of you. You have to be somewhat intentional about that because if you shoot at like the tank, for example, all you're doing is charging their ultimate. Well, while the healer is sitting in the back, just healing them back up, right? So those sorts of direct connections between your plan and the consequences of that make the decision interesting. So that's kind of like a meta example. And there's also very small scale examples to this. For example, there are some platformers where um, you get to choose how long you hold your jump for, right? So if I hold my spacebar, I'm going to keep going up. However, if I like I can do a short press or I can do a long press, right? Sort of varieties like that kind of add a little bit of depth to the game where now I have to think about like, oh, how long should I hold the spacebar for? Right? I can't just uh, click the spacebar whenever I have to. I have to, for some jumps, I have to use a short press. For some jumps, I have to use a long press, right? So that level of thinking is also kind of important. That's not to say that all platformers need to have a short press and a long press for a jump, but that's just one way to add some extra depth, right? So if you're ever playing your own game and you're like, I don't know if this is super interesting or not, look to all of the ways that we discussed. You can make more interesting consequences, right? So the player should have to think about what they're doing. You can add more stakes. So you can add progression, you can add variety. So this already has a bunch of those, right? There's variety in the sort of games you played. You're not going to get bored with a single one. There's stakes, there's a timer, right? So there's all that stuff like that, right? That was actually a little side tangent that I hadn't planned on talking about. How do you make a game interesting, right? That's kind of a very big form of polish that has to always happen, and that's kind of one of the benefits of playtesting a lot. Um, does anyone have any more thoughts on how we can make games more interesting? All right, that was kind of like a big abstract discussion, but we can go back here and look at maybe some smaller things. Um, so now is the point where we get to kind of uh, kind of look at the small scale things as well. This is kind of yeah. So what I kind of want to focus on now is toward the smaller scale things. One thing I noticed immediately is um, first of all, the wires go in front of me. That's cool, right? That's like a small detail that you wouldn't necessarily notice, right? So you have kind of that layer, and you have some kind of foreground, right? Even though it's subtle, it's something, right? And I can see at the sort of the stain on the wall is kind of in the background. This is in the foreground. I also see that um, when I move, the top hat kind of moves, right?
It's a very small animation.
They're very small animations, so that kind of makes me feel like I'm moving up and down slightly. Um, What I could maybe see a little bit more of is maybe playing with the scale of the character. So this all depends on like how cartoonish you want the game to look like, but things like squash and stretch, it's very easy in the Unity animator to sort of play with the scale of that. So for example, this also mostly depends on what the vision of your artist is, but you can always help them out a little bit by just adding small little animations. So if we go in here, and then I'll go to uh, window. Oh, the animation is here. Oh, because it imports all the project settings. Yeah. Okay. So for example, I see that we have this like run animation, and I'm assuming this is the idle
So that
player
yes,
left, player
okay.
right,
There's an idle, there's left and right.
left and right. Nice. Y'all don't actually have to have both a left and a right. What you can do is with the scale, you just go -1. Or sorry, that's the y-axis. For the z-axis here, you can just go -1.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, which is kind of cool. You can also, if you don't like playing with the scale, because sometimes that messes things up, you can also rotate around the y-axis like that. And then your player's facing the other direction. So you can go 180 here, and then 0 would face the other direction. So you can also rotate around the y-axis. And that works with any sort of camera as well. So that might potentially save a little bit of time. But yeah, if you ever like want to maybe help your artist out a little bit, one thing you can do is, so you have this animation. You can also play with the scale. And I'm not necessarily trying to make this look super good right now. This is just kind of a demonstration of what you could do, and you can, of course, polish this up. So let's start with like this. And then when he kind of goes up like this, I'll make him slightly narrower and then maybe slightly taller. And then here, when he's kind of contracting, or I can switch this, I can offset this also slightly. Oh, wait, you have this. Oh, this animation plays quite fast. Do y'all mess with like the time scale of it?
Um, I think it's just like it's those.
Those are the frames.
Yeah.
Oh, I think this might be the number of samples. I usually. Oh, wait, there's some way to set the sample rate. Yeah, I'm just not sure if y'all are doing that or not. But that's fine. That's besides the point. But one thing you might do here is do those 9. So you stretch it out here, and then when it's kind of scrunched up, and then kind of comes back to normal here. The timing is going to be a little bit off because what I would ideally like to do is put this sort of in between here so that the spacing is even. But it should work as well. So you can see it kind of squishes and stretches a little bit, which might make it look a little bit more interesting. This also looks a little bit more cartoony, right? Which might be what you want, might not be what you want. But this is a very easy way to kind of help out your artist, right? You can use animations for everything. This is one of the things that I talk about all the time. Anytime you want any sort of smooth transition between two values, basically any value that you see here in the inspector is usable by the animator. So everything from color to the size of your colliders, your scale, you can change. You can change your speed, anything like that can change. You can change gravity scale. All of that is for you to use. One of the nice things I like to use is, for example, if we have our UI here,
That was an old test.
this is the old text.
I took to the timer, right? So that
Yeah.
was like testing.
I see. Yeah. One of the things you can do that I think is really cool to do. I'll just make a new canvas. This is just it wouldn't fit necessarily with this game, but it's just a thing you could do if you wanted. Is I'll just make a canvas here. I tend to prefer camera space, just because it's a little bit easier to work with. I feel like whenever it's a little bit easier to work with because you know how you have the overlay canvas and it's like huge. The camera space canvas is just on the camera. So you can do scale of screen size. You can set a reference for resolution. I'm assuming this is 16:9 aspect ratio. So I'll just put 16:9. And then oh, this is a little bit smaller scale. So
yeah.
you also change that of, so the camera's here. Oh, because it's a depth thing. Yeah. Oh, I see. This works better with orthographic cameras, but let's just say this is our canvas. Oh, okay, yeah, that's true.
Okay.
Okay, yeah. So, but it helps with it works out with the z-axis. You can just kind of position it.
The camera sometimes to be honest, it's offset like this because with the main like UI for the game.
Oh, I see.
It takes over like the left and bottom. So the game would go in the up and right.
I see, I see. Okay, that's cool. Okay. But yeah, anyway works. The thing I want to demonstrate here is basically like, let's go into here and then let's like maybe make, um, not that, sorry. Uh, let's make a panel, right? And let's just stick our panel here. And our canvas, we want the order and layer to be right up at the front, right? So I just do 100 as a default. And we want our thing here to be, I'll make it a little bit darker, and then you can control the opacity like this, right? So what I can say is maybe we start the game like this, right? If you want to do a very, very simple fade-in animation for any game, and then we go in here and create a new animation, I'll just stick it in whatever folder I have. I'll call this fade in. And then what you do is you just hit record. It starts off at 0 opacity. And I also like to start it. We'll do a fade in. So we'll start at 100% opacity. And then we want to make sure it's enabled like this. And then what we do is we go and we have however long we want our fade in to be. So let's say we want to do half a second. Here, it'll be at 0. And then right after it, I like to usually just disable it, right? So it's a very simple way of, did I put the animations?
Was it active on the first keyframe?
It should be. Possibly, wait. This is on the panel. Oh, it's because it's not active on the first keyframe. Thank you. Yeah. Okay. You can also set this just early on in the animation. What you can do is you can say make it active. Or I don't know why it's not picking up on the active thing. It usually does, but let's just say it is active. Yeah. So it's a very simple way of just having a nice, like simple fade in, right? And then you can play it and then you can make an idle animation with that just basically holds it at the at 0 opacity or disables it. So that's like it doesn't necessarily work with this because you're always constantly switching, but a nice little scene transition there is very easy to do with animation. So you can use the animator for things that are totally like unrelated to animation. And so that's just one cool thing you can do. So we talked about sort of adding that squash and stretch. Another thing we can do is I noticed that the particle effects were kind of going up. Was that intentional?
I wanted it to be like a circular burst, but I didn't have time to look.
Oh, okay, okay.
I didn't remember to do that.
That's fair. That's fair. It's a lot of these things is 2 days is brutal for yeah. So
Particle would be particle would be stored in prefab
yes. So actually let's take a look at that. So prefabs.
particle system is one of those.
Yeah.
I think it's the breakers. Not that one. Yeah.
Which breaker? Okay, yeah. Oh, nice. Yeah. So I have it here. This one's actually a quick fix. You just go like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's talk about particle effects. I did at one point like a whole workshop on particle effects. So y'all can let me know if that would be something that interests you. So you can see how it goes here and it kind of falls off. One thing that would kind of be cool is if maybe we had collision. Which I don't quite know how this will work with the z-axis. So this might not work, but if the z-axes are the same, this will. So we can try it and see if that works. Collision type, and you want to do world collision. We'll leave it at 3D collision. Are they box collider 2Ds?
Yes.
Okay, so we want to do 2D collision. And you just add like a tiny, tiny bounce to it, right? So whenever they hit something, they'll kind of like bounce off the ground like sparks, right? And then maybe one thing we can do is maybe increase the gravity slightly. And one nice thing to always do with particle effects is to use the randomization. This just adds a lot of variety. So we can have something like 1, but then we can also have something like 5. So if I restart this, right, they kind of fall at a different speed now, right? So that's just a little bit of variety that you can add by doing that. Let's see if it works. It does work, yeah. So just kind of, or I don't know if it actually does work. Let me.
Probably a depth thing.
It might be a depth thing, yeah. Right here. Uh, no, they are actually colliding. Oh, I mean, I think the lifetime might just be small. Yeah. But if we increase the lifetime, they could kind of roll around the ground like that, which is something cool that you might do. Um, Overall, this is pretty well polished. Like I think like this is really nice that you have it's like very clear what's going on. Um, some other things that are like maybe like optional, like not necessarily important, but things that you might consider. Um, y'all have heard of Super Mario before, right? Of course, the original one. The way the jump works was um basically it would it would look something like this, your jump path. You would rise up slower than you go,
Yeah.
than you go down. Does anyone know why they did this or why this might be a thing that you want to do?
I just heard it makes the motion feel less floaty.
Yeah, yeah. So explain that a little bit more.
I mean, like, it's like if you fall at the same rate you rise, it kind of feels like you're kind of like in low gravity kind of vibes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Which there are times you might want an even jump. Like I think if I were making like a precision platformer where like if I were making like Celeste or something, I think I actually don't know if Celeste does this or not, but if I like felt that the jump felt awkward, that if I was like if this felt unpredictable, right? So you don't want to do it so much that feels unpredictable. Celeste very well might do this. I actually don't know. And this is very much a side tangent. Has anyone seen Celeste's player controller? It's very brave of them for putting this online. This player controller. Um, they published just their player controller for some reason. Um, you'll see the scroll bar, right?
Oh, no. Why?
A little bit faster. Um,
You put everything in this.
they put everything in it. It is just straight up a game manager. This, how many lines is it? It is 6,000 lines. I tell people to not be shy about their code. Like this is just normal. Um, yeah. So hopefully that's a fun little anecdote that you'll have. So I do have some kind of state machine here. I've never actually looked through this and tried to actually piece it together, but that might be a fun thing to do. But yeah, oh, if I'm not sure we'll have time for it, but if we look at one of my games, there's so many like coding just atrocities that happen in it. Just because if you're in a time crunch, you have to do what you have to do, right? It was back to this, right? Um, so yeah, so one reason that it feels floaty is it's hard to explain, but whenever you're actually playing a game that does this, like when you like try Super Mario, the way it feels is kind of like when you're actively holding the space bar, it's like there's some resistance. And then when you get let go, it's like you more sort of crash to the ground. It makes your player feel like it has more weight, right? Um, when things and this like the idea of weight is like very abstract. Right? This is like a very abstract concept. People use it a lot. Um, like it's not super clear why falling fast. This just anything that increases right? So things like for example, recoil. Whenever you have like maybe a top-down shooter, just that slight bit of recoil on the camera makes it have more weight. Screen shake is a great way of doing this. Um, Screen shake is a great way to add more weight. Another thing that you can do is something called hit stop. Does anyone know what hit stop is?
Oh, whenever you attack an enemy, it can like pause the game for
Yeah, exactly. So it's just a very slight pause that happens whenever you like hit an important enemy, or and you have to be kind of intentional when you use this, because otherwise people will think it's lag. But if you pick sort of very key moments in the game, like maybe if the character has like a sniper rifle and they hit a headshot or something, right, or something like important, or maybe they defeat like a boss, or they clear a level, right? That slight bit of pause. Whenever they hit something it makes it feel it emphasizes it a little bit more, which makes it feel like it has more weight. These are all ways that you can add sort of the sort of very abstract concept of weight. This is how you do it in platform ways, right? So we can experiment with this and see kind of how this might feel with the player controller. It might not necessarily fit. It doesn't fit with all games, but it's at least good to know that you have this option. This is something you can do.
It's a really small file. I mean,
Okay.
yeah. It's not.
Let's see. Okay, nice. So I see that you'll have your jump force layer check, and then you have your rigid body. I'm gonna add two things here. Serialized field. I'm gonna do normal gravity scale. This is a float. Normal gravity. Oh, I can't type today. And then hot speed gravity. Thank you, AI. Fall gravity. So what we're basically going to do is
I made weird choices here. I don't know why I put movement and jumping in like the big stuff.
oh, this is fine. Like it's not honestly the player probably won't notice a difference. One thing is getting input in fixed update might cause some strange behavior. The reason is so if people don't know, it's a little bit difficult to understand how fixed update works. Every game handles it differently. I might not fully understand what's going on with fixed update, but my understanding is basically you have your game and it's a frame rate, right? I think some people think it runs like simultaneously. Like there's fixed update and then there's update, and they're just kind of running in parallel, like independently, which is not actually what's happening if I understand correctly. But it has like let's say here's your frame rate, right? And let's say your frame rate is, let's say like 120 frames per second, right? You'll basically get a fixed update here. And so let's say these are your normal frames, right? These are all your normal frames. If you have at 50 frames per second, or actually, I'll make the math a little bit easier. Let's say we're running the game at 100 frames per second. Basically, the way I think it'll work is every other frame, you'll get a fixed update that also happens, right? If you're running the game at 120 frames per second, then it might be every like 2 or 3 frames, right? It's just however the math ends up working out, right? You'll also get a fixed update. If your game is running at 30 frames per second, it basically backlogs, let's say like 2 fixed updates, and it actually applies them visibly at that 30 frames per second limit. So it's not running in like a separate thread or anything. It's not running in parallel. It's very much still determined by your normal frame rate. So doing something like reading input, I guess it could work. You would just have, I guess, like a backlog of inputs that would only be applied when you're doing that, which may or may not be necessary. I don't think, I mean, it doesn't have a visible impact on the game. Basically, you what you want to be concerned about is just not overloading. Thank you for coming.
I think it might do something. I don't know if it's the jump sound effect that's bugging, but I noticed sometimes whenever you jump, it double plays a sound effect.
Oh, wait.
That
That could be why. Like if it has to backlog multiple. Yeah. That's interesting. Yeah. I hadn't thought of that.
I have a different club meeting I have to go to.
Okay, nice.
I'm sorry. If you want to like
You're all
play a
good.
different game, that's fine.
You're all good. Yeah. These are also advertised as 2 hours long. In practice, I don't think I've ever gone above an hour and a half. So just as a note for all of y'all, I will also think about that. But typically these workshops are going to last an hour and a half usually, even though they're advertised as 2 hours. It is how I typically do it. But yeah, no, thank you for volunteering your game.
Yeah,
It's nice. Yeah.
Thanks for like all the advice and whatnot.
course, yeah.
I really appreciate it. Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm
of
gonna
course.
go in and do some of this myself now.
Nice. Yeah.
On the side.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think working on Game Jam games afterwards is really important. So, yeah.
Very evening.
All right. Thank you. Great. Wait, did you also work on this game? Okay, you seem very familiar with it, or just very. This is also true because when you point out the timer thing, right? Like, I don't know if it's like easier for somebody who's like not playing the game. Like, I also feel like when I'm spectating, I notice more than when I'm like actually playing a game. So I think that also um
I think,
is different.
yeah,
Yeah.
definitely, because I think you're playing the game, you're trying to learn it. I was just watching you play it, so I could like hit and
Yeah,
so
exactly. This is why playtesting is quite important. I think the thing I struggle with the most is just difficulty curves and like communicating what you want to communicate to the player. It's especially difficult in like a game jam where like nobody's thinking about a tutorial in a game jam, right?
yeah.
Um, but I think that's definitely like the area of improvement I'm looking like most towards. It's just how do you actually get players to learn your game effectively? It's to me it's easily the most difficult thing. I think. But yeah, anyways, with this, we can do this sort of Mario style movement, where we can check the every physics frame. We can check, uh, basically the RB gravity scale. We can set it to basically is RB dot linear velocity. Y. We can check that it's if it's less than zero or not. And if it is less than zero, then we get the follow gravity scale. Otherwise, we get the normal gravity. Does this syntax make sense to everyone? Does anyone not know what this syntax means? Okay, so this is something called a ternary operator. Um, Ternary operators. Some people hate these. Some people love them. Some people basically argue that they're like unreadable. Um, and like fair enough, but I think in my opinion, once you get used to them, they can kind of be a more concise way to explain something like this. What this basically does is you have a variable, right? Some variables and like var x is equal to, right? And then here you might want to put some kind of thing. What you would do is you would have some kind of Boolean statement, some kind of like conditional, right? So in this case, the conditional is RB dot linear velocity is less than zero. So that's going to either be true or false, right? So that will evaluate to either true or false. So this would be true, false. And then you're going to put a next question mark, right? And basically, if it's true, then x is equal to this thing, right? So if it's true, then x is going to be equal to this thing. Otherwise, you put a colon, and then you have this other thing, and then if it's false, you get this last thing. So for example, here you would have RB dot linear velocity is less than zero. If it's less than zero, then RB dot gravity scale is going to become fall gravity. If it's not less than zero, then RB dot gravity scale is going to become normal gravity. Does that make sense? Kind of. Let's go for an example. So let's say I have like int x is equal to, I'm gonna have some bool condition. Condition. And I'm going to evaluate it, x equals 5, or x 3. So if I have this line, let's say condition is true, right? So this evaluates, right? Then what is x going to be? It's going to be the first thing. On the other hand, if condition is false, then it's going to be the second thing. Does that kind of help a little bit? It's also basically the equivalent of having something like var x, if condition x is equal to the first thing, else x is equal to the other thing. Okay. So these two things mean like exactly the same thing. So for example, here I could have also written this like this is exactly the same thing as saying if uh if RB dot linear velocity y is less than zero, then RB dot gravity scale is equal to fall gravity, else RB dot gravity scale is equal to normal gravity. These two lines mean exactly the same thing. I prefer this way just because it's more concise. Some people hate this, some people use it. I'm one of the people that uses it, but it's basically means the same thing. So we have this if statement. So now if we go in here and we let that kind of compile. Let that. Oh, and then I have here, and I want to look for my platform controller. So I want my normal gravity to be whatever it is normally, and I want my fall gravity to be kind of a bit more. Now here, as you can see, I fall quite a bit faster. And then so that just helps with getting that tiny bit more oomph in it, right? Which is what you want. We also have, let me try setting this a little bit more, something like 7 or something. So you can see, you really see the difference there. And you may or may not want that, but yeah, you may or may not want that, but this is one way to kind of add that extra bit of feeling there. Okay. What's another thing that we can talk about? I was going to do a platformer specific workshop, and I might still do that just because there's a lot of detail that you can go over. Who here has heard of Coyote Time? Do you want to explain what Coyote Time is? Okay. Coyote Time is basically like when you like walk off a ledge, you know that in those like old cartoons when you would like some like character would like walk off an edge, like walk off a cliff or something, and then they would like hang there in midair before like falling. What Coyote Time is basically we're gonna say we have our player here, and if the player is like right here, right, we're just gonna go ahead and let them go, right? So even if you're right here, it's like, you're barely off of the ledge. That's fine. We're just gonna let you jump anyway, right? The reason we do this is because even though it's technically not physically accurate, if average human reaction time is like what, like quarter of a second or so, something like that. It's like either a quarter or a fifth of a second, right? If I perceive, right, if I feel like I press space right here, right? I think I'm convinced I pressed space right when I saw the character right there. I'm actually wrong, and by the time I reacted, I'm actually over here, right? So if you don't have Coyote Time, it feels unresponsive, right? Even though it's technically wrong to allow the player to jump here, it ends up feeling more correct, and that's simply because when we perceive the player being on the edge, it's already kind of too late, right? So what a lot of platformers will do is kind of give you that tiny bit of leeway, right? So one way of doing this is we have sort of our is grounded variable here. And I might implement this, I might not, we'll see. You have your ground check, right? And your ground check takes an overlap circle. Does this kind of make sense to everyone? How this works? Does anyone have any questions about how this works? Yes. Okay. So basically, when you're making any sort of platformer, right? And we can go over more detail with some later time if you'll want, but basically whenever you have a platformer, right? When should the player jump? Or be allowed to jump when they're on the ground, right?
Yeah.
So how do we know if they're on the ground? Yes, so you could do that. However, when you have like a collision box, right? Let's say you have like this, right? But when you have something like this, and this is, let's say my hitbox, right? How do I distinguish this versus like, let's say there's a ledge here, right? And these things both have collision boxes, right? My collision box here is touching this here, right? But I'm not really touching the ground, like this is the ground I'm touching, right? So, and this also gets complicated, like what if there's a platform above you, right? And then you like bump your head on the ceiling, right? So the idea is like we can't necessarily get the exact points of the collision.
So just on your collision around your foot.
Well, yeah, basically what you do is you take a small transform. That's what the ground check is. So actually I bet if I go in here, and I look at platformer player and I open it up, there's a ground check, and you can see a ground check is placed right at their feet, right? Which actually I think the Z position might be messing with exactly where that is, but typically in an orthographic camera, it would be like right there. Right. So what you do is you take a little point there. This is by no means the only way to do this. There are lots of ways to do this. And what you do is you do what's called like a circle pass. Right there at the field there. And you check, have I collided with the player? The other benefit of this is you can have what's called a layer mask. So you can give objects in Unity a layer. So you can see, for example, here, the ground check has default layer just because it's a ground check. But I bet if I go in here and I go here to wherever the colliders are. So here you can see there's ground layer, right? So these are things that are considered part of the ground, right? So you still want the player to collide with things that are non-ground, but you only want this to consider things that are on the ground. Right. So you can kind of do that, what we call layer masking, right? So you send a little circle here and you detect like the physics engine will return back, oh, here are whether or not you're colliding. So what you're doing here is you have your is grounded, which is being set to physics2d.overlap circle. And then you have ground check dot position. So that's the position of the object we were just looking at. 0.2 is the radius, and then layer is the layer mask that you want to set. So the layer mask is literally just a type layer mask. And what you do is you go in here, and you just select which layers you want to be included in that. So then that builds up your layer mask. So that's what we do there. So are you familiar with raycasting?
Yeah, you draw a line of little points like this.
Yeah. You can do that actually. That's something called I think the technique you're describing there is called like ray marching.
Yeah.
Where you draw lots of tiny little points. That's related to, but not necessarily the same thing as raycasting. With raycasting, you're basically going to know the geometry of your colliders, and you're basically just going to use like a system of equations to like figure out whether or not these two lines intersect, right? So that avoids having to do some things, right? There are times where you want to do this if you want to do like fancy ray marching algorithms, but that's not necessarily the commonplace. So it's basically like a raycast but for a circle. We basically want to determine whether or not the circle is intersecting that box or not. What's one potential problem with doing like this, for example? Like, let's say this is my radius, but here's my clearance box.
But it's like the very corner of your hitbox.
Yeah, exactly. Right. What if I'm like, so really you want to be so careful about doing this. You want to be a decent radius. You can either make this a decent radius. You can also do free raycasts. So here's my player. I can do a raycast here, I can do a raycast here, and I can do a raycast in the middle. So you do free raycasts. Raycasts are pretty cheap. So you can easily do free raycasts for frame. And then you can use this to check them out where you cover all of it. I also believe, I'm not entirely sure, I believe that Unity has what's called a box cast. So you can do a raycast, but like in the shape of a box. I can't remember using it that much. I don't make that many platformers, but you can also just straight up cover the entire thing. The reason we do raycasts is because they're a little bit more like lightweights than a full-on collider component. The collider component is going to have a bunch of extra things that we don't necessarily need if all we want to do is sort of check collision, right? So that's why we do the linear test. But that's how that works. Um, so if you want to implement coyote time, how might you do that? Um,
You would have other the clock slightly to the left and to the right.
Mhm.
Maybe have like a timer that comes down as soon as you walk on the edge.
yeah, I like that. So, for example, we can have her here float uh coyote time. I'm just gonna set it to like 0.2 or something like that. Of course, you would expose this in the inspector normally, but I'll just do it here. And then I'll have coyote timer. So I think about it is we could say that whenever you're grounded, or whenever you are not on the ground, your coyote timer um is going to start counting down, right? So we could say that if you're not grounded,
One, always make it count up, and then whenever it is grounded, you set it back to zero.
yes, you could also do that. Actually, yeah. So that's one way you could do this. Uh, if you are grounded, then you would wait. Sorry, repeat your idea again.
If it is grounded, then coyote time is equal to zero, else so coyote time is equals to however long the thing is.
Okay, yeah. So otherwise, coyote time. So in this case, you would have so, and then if your coyote time is reached a certain point, then okay, yeah. So then here, if you're doing so instead checking is grounded, what would you check instead? You would check coyote time.
Coyote.
Coyote time. Yeah, exactly. Uh, yeah, so you can do it like this. And then whenever you are grounded, you just reset it there, and then you count up, and then you start at zero. So we're just gonna make this like egregiously long, just to kind of demonstrate. Finish compiling there. Oh, it's not letting me jump. Why not? Coyote time is this. That'll do it. Yeah. Okay. This is why you don't name your variables basically the exact same thing. Okay, so I can jump. And if I go here, right, I'm just gonna like fall off. And you can see I can, yeah,
If you dump it, you should set
you
it
should,
to a higher amount.
yeah. So what we'll do is whenever you jump, oh, coyote time is equal to coyote time. And then that, oh, thank you. Nice, we have this now. Now I shouldn't go flying off like a helicopter. That's a little bit more. I hear the audio thing. Yeah, that's interesting. Um, yeah, so let me do something like egregious, like walk off and then press it in midair. You can see like I can fully like jump in midair now, right? And it'll let me do that for like a full second afterwards. Yeah. So that's coyote time. That's another thing just to help your game be more responsive. And it took like what, 3 lines of code. You have this used replace your is grounded check, and then you have this, right? Um, any other ideas, questions, comments? Trying to think of other polish we can do. If not, I think I basically got to everything I wanted to cover. So yeah, thank you all for coming. If you'll have like any questions, any sort of specific things that y'all want want me to talk about. I'll hang out here for like another 5 or so minutes. Um, but yeah, other than that, thank you all for coming, and I hope this was useful to y'all.